Welcome back everybody, this is Waves back with another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you Fastify. Fastify is a great framework built on Node.js. It's fast, low overhead web framework, minimalistic, which means it does not provide all the things out of the box, but allows you to create your own custom plugins. Let's go to the content of this course. Before you start the course, you gotta make sure that you understand what you're gonna get from this course. So this is the complete Fastify course. I've already done the crash course, but this is the in detail Fastify course. Next, we're gonna talk about content. Now, in terms of content, we will set up our project with CLI with templates, and I'll also show you how you can set up a project within a plain JavaScript way. We're going to learn how to run our project. Basically, at this stage, you will have your project up and running, and you will be able to hit localhost 3000 on whatever the port that we choose to run our project. Now, I'll show you how you can create CRUD operations. So these are basically going to be endpoints where you can hit from Postman or from React or Angular or any front-end application, and it will respond to your request. Then we will learn how do we implement plugins in Fastify. There are core plugins, custom plugins. We'll go over them. This stage, we will have the understanding of Fastify. Then we will go into details of request object, response object, validation, and serializing data. Then I'll also show you how you can extend Fastify instance. There are ways how you can extend and add more features to Fastify framework. One way is to writing custom plugins. We'll also cover how you can test your code. And there are also some advanced concept that I will touch base, like logging. What is logging in the backend application? Why should you log? Then we will also take a look at TypeScript. TypeScript is my favorite programming language, and I'll show you how you can create and set a project with TypeScript. And that way you will be able to use Fastify type definition files and also create your own custom types for your project. There are some concepts that we will talk about: content type parser, decorators, hooks, middlewares. Then this is one of the most important topic that I will cover, which is style guide, how to properly structure your code when writing JavaScript backend application. Now, this is all good, right? But to be able to practice the code, you need to have some sort of a project. So we will start with the project. At that stage, I'll name this as a work time, and this is going to be the API for a front end. You can hit those APIs using Postman or any front end application. We're definitely not going to build any front end application for this course, but you could hit those APIs from the Postman or Visual Studio client. This project will cover authentication with JWT, MongoDB connection. We'll perform CRUD operations, we'll expose endpoints for our front-end application, and we'll run a project in Docker container. And I maybe show you how you can deploy that project in a cloud using AWS. We also have some prerequisite for this course. So for a prerequisite, you need to understand TypeScript or JavaScript. Well, if you understand JavaScript, you should be able to follow along. But if you understand TypeScript, you definitely know JavaScript as well. You need to have a basic knowledge of REST APIs, how they work. Understanding HTTP protocol is a mandatory for this course, because I'm not going to be explaining how your front-end application or Postman is talking to your backend server, because every time you make any action on your phone, there's a chance that it is talking to a backend server, and that connection is done through HTTP protocol. You don't have to go into detail of this, but understanding how your front-end application, like your mobile or web application, can talk to your backend is a plus. Now, before we start, I would like to request, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and also take a look at my GitHub and follow me on there for source code. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to chat with me. Now, also all of these links are available in the description of this video. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started with Fastify building backend APIs. Let's take a look at a documentation of Fastify. So here's a Fastify website, fastify.io. On this page, you will see documentation section, ecosystem, benchmarks. We'll start with looking at docs. In docs, you will see the guide, and the best way to learn is by following the official documentation. Now you might be wondering, am I going to go over this documentation, just read from the documentation and show you nothing else? Well, that's not the case, because I'm going to be using documentation because I want you to have a reference guide. Because once you have a reference guide, then you can always go back to documentation and exactly find out where the things are instead of watching this very long video. I'm not saying don't watch this video, but it's going to be quicker for you once you watch this video. You can always refer back to the official documentation, and that's basically the main place where Fastify will have all its updated information. Let's get started by setting up a new project with Fastify. There are two IDEs which are very popular. First one being Visual Studio Code, it's open free, and then the most powerful one, which is WebStorm. So I'll be using WebStorm. You are more than welcome to start with VS Code, Sublime Text, or Atom. Doesn't really matter, but I'll be using WebStorm because I'm more comfortable with that. So first thing we're going to do is create a new project in WebStorm, and I'm going to select Node.js, and we're going to call this work time. I'm going to use this Node 16.13.1, which is the LTS version at the time of this recording. We'll just go ahead and create the project, and it will create a project for us, and it will set up this package.json. Right now, we don't really have anything in package.json. So what we're going to do is install Fastify first. So npm install Fastify, and you just gotta press enter. We got a node modules folder, we got package.json, and then here we got the test script, and then we've successfully installed Fastify. Now let's go and create a new file. I'm going to create this JavaScript file, and I'm going to name it app.js. Start by importing Fastify. You have a Fastify import, then I'm going to use this app equal to Fastify, and for options I'm just passing logger is equal to true. Then we're going to create a get request endpoint, which is going to be just this bit here. Then we are going to use app.listen, and we're using this port 3000 to listen, and that's it. That's how you can create your Fastify server. Pretty straightforward. On terminal and type node app.js. Now at this stage, your server is listening on port 3000. We will verify this by going to the browser. Let's refresh this page, and you will see it is going to make an API call in the network. So let's refresh. That's a call to your local host, and that's what it's returning. Let's go back to the browser, and I'm going to make a change to hello world, save the file, and once we refresh, you see we don't have a change yet. The reason why is because we changed the file, but we haven't restarted the server. So using a plain node will not restart itself when you change a file. And for that, we can use a package called nodemon. The command to install nodemon is npm install -g nodemon, and once this is installed, you can use nodemon to watch for the file changes. So if you change a file, it will automatically restart the server. So we have successfully installed nodemon. I'm going to type nodemon space app.js, and now you can see it is watching for changes in your file as well. We're going to go and make a change to this hello and lowercase world, and you can see when I make a change, you see the server is being updated. Let's go back to the browser, and I'm going to refresh, and you can see I have hello world. To verify our server is restarting on the change, so I'm going to change this object to simple hello world in string. Server restarted. Let's go back to the browser, refresh, and now you can see it is only returning hello world in a string form. So at this stage, you have successfully created a server using Fastify, and you see how much code is required to actually create a server. Look at the content. We have successfully achieved at this point, but we haven't seen how do we create a Fastify project using Fastify CLI and with some templates. So let's go back to WebStorm, and we can use Fastify CLI by using npx command. But let me take you to documentation quickly so you know where you can read more about Fastify CLI. So here it tells you how to install Fastify CLI globally on your local machine and how to generate a new project. Now this information is directly on the main home page. after core quick start here it says using CLI. Now let's go to Fastify CLI repository. So here you can see how this was built and some more information around Fastify. So here you got this Fastify generate. You can generate a new project with that. You can even specify a template for that. So, and I'm going to find TypeScript. There you go. So here is a TypeScript full command. So you got to specify --lang ts if you want to use Fastify with TypeScript. So let's go back to WebStorm, and in the terminal, I'm going to type npx fastify-cli and generate command, and I'm going to say temp fastify and --lang equal to ts. Okay, I'm going to press enter and it's going to generate a project. I'm going to use VS Code to open that project. So I'll just choose command code temp fastify, enter, and that project will be open in VS Code. Now, if you look at this project, it has this TypeScript config file, tsconfig.json, which talks about where is your directory or source map or include. Now, here in the source, you have this main entry point app.ts, which basically an entry file for your Fastify. If you look at on the top here, you have this auto load plugin being used. So this plugin basically allows you to auto load plugins and routes automatically by specifying the directory. So what it's doing here, it's basically looking for this plugins directory and routes directory, which is here, and will auto load everything which listed here. But that's pretty much out of scope for now for our training, but we'll obviously come back to TypeScript and using this project later. Let's go back to the previous project. I'm going to start by adding one more script, which is going to be start. And for that, we are going to use this node-mon. Now I'm going to be running this using WebStorm play button, and this is actually running through Node. So let's stop this, and in WebStorm I can click here and I can start this start script. Now it's looking for a file change. Let's go back to app.js, add one more endpoint. Hello, this is going to return hello. I'm going to change this to main root. In the browser, I'm going to refresh the localhost colon 3000 and it is returning main root, and as you can see in the response as well. Let's change that to /hello, enter, and you get to see we're getting hello world. So at this stage, we have two endpoints that we can hit using the API. As with many frameworks, we can create post request. We can also create delete request and put request. So I'm just gonna quickly create all those requests. Let's create a put request now, change that to put. Then I'm gonna start adding /delete for delete request, /post for post request, and /put for put request. Try these endpoints. We're going to go to browser, and if I go ahead and refresh this, now we're getting an error. It says /hello does not exist. Well, that's correct because we don't have a /hello anymore. On localhost 3000, you get to see that I'm getting main root back. I'll also try to grab this post, enter, and you're going to get a message saying root get post not found error. So what is going on? Well, the problem is when you look at this post, it is actually making a get request, and get request is not valid. We need to do the post request. You can use tools like Postman or Visual Studio HTTP client, or in WebStorm I have another built-in feature in WebStorm that I can use to make HTTP calls. So I'm going to start by using Postman because that's like the most common way of doing it. Here we have Postman. I'm going to zoom into it a little bit so you guys can follow easily. I'm going to create a new request, and I'm going to change the request type to post, and that would be localhost colon 3000 /post. So click on send, and there you go. You get the 200 response back, right? And you get the result back post request. which means the post is working. Now, if I change this post to, let's say, get and send it, it's gonna throw an error. It says post not found, which is fine because it's not a get method, it's a post method. Now also I'm gonna change this to put and send. Same, it says put/post not found. So that means whatever the method that you create, you have to match that. So if I go and delete it, and I will just send that delete, same error message. But let's go and change this to delete, send, and you get delete request here. So next we're going to take a look at our content. So we got this right, got this done, we got this CRUD operation done. So basically CRUD operations is like, you got the APIs done, but the logic that you're going to write is up to you. You got to understand what's your, JavaScript logic going to do here and what it's going to return. Now let's go and take a look at plugin ecosystem and core/custom plugins. So let me take you to documentation, and I'm going to go and click on ecosystem on the top. Here we have core plugins, right? Then down here we have the community-based plugin, which is like a custom plugin. And to be able to publish your plugin here in this list, you have to follow certain things because these are really tested by the Fastify team. That's why they are listed here. Now, one of the plugins that we are going to look at is going to be Fastify Auth. You can also go with Fastify Barrier Auth, normal auth, or basic auth. So let's click on Fastify Barrier Auth. Here is a plugin, and we can see there are a lot of contributors to it. And if you look at its documentation, it allows you to do your authentication very, very easily. Now this is all good, but let's go and try to see some other plugins. In this core plugin list, one of the plugin is Fastify-MongoDB. This is a plugin which makes it very, very easy to make a connection to a Mongo database. I've got this Docker running, and I'm gonna try running MongoDB within a Docker, and then we'll go and connect to MongoDB. Go back to ecosystem and let's visit quickly on community-based plugins. In the community-based plugins, I would like to point out we have this Fastify Access to make an API call from your backend server to some other third party. Next, we have another very cool plugin is this Fastify Decorators. So this plugin that provides a set of TypeScript decorators. There's a lot of cool stuff in that. So if you're interested, take a look at that one. Next, I'm gonna go down and find Mongo's API. This is another very, very cool plugin that we will need. It's basically a plugin to use the Mongo API in Fastify very, very easily, and to do a CRUD operations to your database. Let's go down. We got this node mailer. If you want to send in email stuff, that's one thing that you can choose. Let's go down. I want to find another plugin. Let me try searching for it. So SQLite, and that's the one. So first, let me try one more time. Yeah, that's pretty much here. So this Fastify SQLite is a plugin that will help you to connect to your MySQL, Postgres, or SQL databases. This is another very cool plugin. Now, this is up to you to go through these plugins and take a look at what you need for your particular task, and then just go through its documentation. So from our keynote, we have talked about plugins, core plugins, and custom plugins, or community-based plugins. Now let's go and take a look at these core features from Fastify, like request, response, validation, and serial data. So first of all, let's go to documentation. I'm gonna go to docs. Let's go down, and here is a documentation for your request. So request is a parameter of a handler function. Request object has a lot of properties. For example, query, body, method protocol URL. So to be able to check the incoming request where it's coming from, you can actually target console log request.url. Let's paste it here and let's try with the Postman. Let's send the request, and now you can see here is a log where it's coming from. So to be more specific, I'm going to say URL equal to comma and that. So now if we go to Postman and send the request, then you see it's coming from URL/this. So what's happening here is if I go ahead and change this to hello, okay, and then we'll grab this hello, send the request, and now you will see the URL being hello. Right, so request object is here in the documentation, and this is what you can grab from request object. Like if you're gonna grab the body of a payload, which basically is a post request, you got a headers, raw request, a server ID of the request, host name, protocol, is it HTTPS or HTTP, you can have a socket connection. So here's an explanation for that. I'm gonna just copy this bit and then go ahead and paste that in the post request. Post it, go up and turn off the logger in Fastify. Right, so I don't have this gibberish here because all of this makes it a little bit confusing. Postman, select raw and select JSON. I'm going to type person and I'll just put my name there and then click on send. And there you go. You got the post request, got all the things logged from the request object, and you can just visit them as well if you want to. Next, take a look at the response. In Fastify, the term response is not really used, it's reply. So if you go to your Fastify documentation and click on reply, reply object can be used to send the response. We are currently just returning the primitive data, but in reply, you can do a lot more. For example, if you want to change the status code, you can call this .code and pass in the status code there. So let's try that. I'm not going to use this post request right now because there's a lot of logs and we can actually remove the logs there. I'm going to use this get request to return with the reply. So let's go and say return reply dot, and first of all, let's go and grab the code. We're going to change this to 201, and there's another method that we can call on it, which is coming from Fastify. And then here we can say object returned. Now let's save this and make sure the server updates. Yep, it did update. Let's go to Postman, and within the Postman, I'm going to create another GET request. So let's just do localhost and then send. Once you do that, then one thing you notice is like here we got the response, but we also have the status code changed. But by default, when you comment this out and we just return this hello world and we try that now, the response is actually 200. That's the status code for it. So you can override things in reply method. Let's go take a look at what else you can do. So here it says you can call all of these methods on reply, which means you can grab the headers, you can get the headers, you can remove header key, or you can do redirect to a different code. You can send, and here's what we used: send. A send will take the data. It can grab objects, strings, streams, buffer, even errors or type of final payload, and also async await will work with that as well. Then this is going to return .then. So let's say if I am going to remove this and do this, then I'm going to say .then, and within this fulfillment, I'm going to just do a log, console log response is equal to response, but I'll just say a message for now, which would be response sent. Okay, so this code will only execute when the response will be sent properly. So let's ident it. Here WebStorm is telling us there's a problem. It says invalid number of arguments. Yes, so we just grab, let's say, response. Actually, it's going to be reply. So let's change this to reply as well. Okay, then I'm going to go to Postman. Let's make the size a little bit smaller so we could see the logs in our code as well. Let me make it a little bit smaller in the Postman. I'm going to send that, and it says object return. This is your status code. But also, once this is fulfilled, here we have this reply sent logged in our console as well. So you can see that you could change things using the reply method. Let's go to the documentation, and I want you to go through and read about it. These are very simple things to read, and you will know what each property or method will do on the reply as a good examples here as well. Let's go to our keynote and take a look at what's next. Now we're going to talk about validation and serializing data. And we're going to take you to documentation, and in getting started guide, there is a guide for validating your data, which talks about data validation is extremely important and a core concept of a framework. So to validate incoming requests, Falsify uses JSON schema. And you can do this, something like this constant variable that you can have schema, body, and then properties, and then you can pass in as post. Paste that constant object just above post, and we can pass that as OPTS now, and then go into the post, and the second argument would be OPTS. We can change the response to an object with hello as a key and world as a value. Now when we make a request using Postman, it is going to validate our data. But one thing to mention, it has to have a content type as application/JSON. So if I go take you to documentation, here is talking about validating data and serializing data. It's basically the same way. It's how you define a schema, and schema's reference will be down in this documentation. I'm going to click on validation and serialization. Here it clearly says validation will only be attempted if the content type is set to application-JSON. So if I go ahead and change this to, let's say, application-JSON and send that, and now here it says status code 415. It says faster, there's a media type issue there. This is not a media type because, obviously that's not right. So you gotta type this /JSON and you get the hello world back. Now from the documentation, I would highly recommend to go through this documentation for validation and serialization. It'll give you all the options that you need to be able to see what schema it can be put into. For example, here's a body JSON schema, and here's the types and values that you can, use in body schema. You got a query JSON schema, parameter schema, header JSON schema, and just a schema that gets to use like that here in the post request. Now this is a long guide here. Just go through this and you'll get an idea where you can use validation and serialization and what is the options available in Falsify. So within this, we wanted to learn how do we parse this request payloads. Well, parsing request payload is quite easy and out of the box when it comes to JSON object. So right now you see here is a post request, and the body that we're sending is person Wais Mirza, right? And within this post request, what I'm going to do is do a console.log. I use type of request.body. Okay, and also we're going to just log request.body. Now this is supposed to be JSON because it will be passed out from this request object automatically by Falsify. So I'll just send that, and let's take a look at the log first. So here there's a type object. It's supposed to be a JSON if it shouldn't parse, or if it doesn't parse, but it is parsing, that's why it's coming as object. And then here it's logging that object to the console. Here you can see it's pretty straightforward, as it says Fastify parses JSON and plain text request payload natively with the result from Fastify request object at request.body. And that's about it. Now we'll get to content type parsers when we talk about some more advanced stuff. Now we are at that stage where we want to extend Fastify, which is quite good. Let's go to documentation, and here it talks about extending your server. Okay, and I'm going to click on it, and that's where it talks about extending a server. So it says Fastify is built into extremely extensible and minimal. We believe that a bare bone framework is all needed to make a great application possible. So in other words, Fastify is not batteries included framework and relies on an amazing ecosystem. So the way you extend your Fastify is by adding plugins. Here it talks about your first plugin, and that's what we are going to write now. So to be able to generate plugin, we can use Fastify CLI. Let's go up, and we're going to find a command. Say it's going to generate this, but here is a generate plugin command. So I'll just use Fastify generate plugin command. Okay, the plugin is generated. So this is like a full package. We're going to take a look at some of the file structure of this plugin. So here we got index.js file, package.json file, which imports this Fastify plugin, which is another API that Fastify provides for us to write custom plugins. And it's pretty simple. It has its own TypeScript configuration file, test folder, and GitHub folder. This way of writing plugin is okay when you want to write that as a separate package, but we don't need that for now. I'm going to delete the folder, and I'm going to create a directory, and I will name it plugins. Inside this folder, I'm going to create a JavaScript file, and we'll say database connection.js. Before we write our plugin code, I want to go back to package.json, and I want to change the type to common.js. Using modules is going to allow us to use import keyword and import things from different files, but common.js is the default way of Node, so we'll just stick to common.js because other one has some issues, so we'll just change that to common.js. That's pretty much the reason. So here I'm going to paste the code. Here we are requiring Fastify plugin API. And why we need that? Because we need to wrap our custom plugin function into Fastify plugin. This way we'll make it available to other files as a registry. So now we have the function which is going to call this Fastify MongoDB plugin, and it provides then the URL which makes the connection to running MongoDB. And if you look at Docker, here I've got a work time MongoDB running in Docker, which exposes this 27017 port. So let's go back to app.js, and here first of all I'm going to register that DB connector using fastify.register, and then I'm going to import DB connector using a required keyword. And another thing you notice, I've changed something here. It was basically using import previously, but now we're using common.js, so that's why you gotta use this required keyword to require things from other files. Also, I'm gonna use the power of WebStorm. I'm going to change the Fastify to app. I'll just save this file and restart the server. And as you can see, our application is starting perfectly fine, and that means we have a connection to MongoDB as well. Let's recap by going to our keynote. And here we have also seen this custom plugin and extending Fastify. So yeah, these 2 points are good. The next one is going to be some sort of testing, how you test your code. Well, this requires some configuration, and the best way to start testing is by creating a project using Fastify CLI, which set up things for you automatically. But we'll come back to this in a second. Let's go to our next slide. Here I wanted to show you logging, content type parser, decorator, hooks, and middleware. And I think it's the time for us to take a look at logging first. Then we will use this content type parser, decorators, hooks, middlewares, and then I'll give you a style guide when I start this project. So we'll start with the logging first. So let's go to documentation. In the docs, there's a pretty good guide about the logging, which I'm gonna follow. So here it says enable logging. Logging is disabled by default. We can enable it by using this logger to true, and you can also pass logger level as well. So when you create a Fossify instance, you can actually specify that, which we're already doing. So if you take a look at app.js, here we got this logger to true, and that's why you see every time we make a call, for example, we're going to use Postman to make a call to this get. Click on that, and you will notice here we have a log for this API call. So it says level 30, how much time it took, PID, hostname, which is coming from a local host. Then you have the status code and a response time, then the message that was sent. So you see the log is coming through by making this true. So if I change this to false, save that, we go to Postman, and I'm gonna send the request, and I see that log is no longer appearing. Let's go to documentation for logging. Now, logging is done through this Pinot library, which is a very famous library for logging in JavaScript by Node World. Here, this guide will tell you how you can configure the logging. For example, up here, we have this log level info. If I just copy this and go back to WebStorm, and then I'm gonna grab this whole object. Let's go to the code, paste that here. Now the logging is set via info. So let's see what's the difference. Let's send a request, and you can see the complete request is coming in. Then we're gonna change this to, let's say, warning. Let's send a request, and now there is no log. If I change this to, let's say, debug, let's send the request, and you get to see all the log. Now to be able to find out what these options are, you can use something called this abstract logging, which will give you, what type of log you can do. So here are the interface like fatal, error, warn, info, debug. So this is like the, abstract logging library that is being used here. Let's go close this. You can also use this Pinot logger within your route handler. So if I go into get requests, right now we're using this console log. I'm going to remove that and paste the code here. So here we're accessing this route, and on the route we have log object, which has some values. For example, if I remove this, you can see info is there, error, debug, warn, fatal, trace. So in this case, we'll just use, let's say, error. What happens? I'm going to go to Postman. I'm going to send this request, and you will see there is a log which says some info about the current request, and its type is error. So you can use that here, or you can use the Fossify instance to get access to Pinot to be able to log outside your route handler. For example, I'm going to use app log.info, and we just say starting server, for example. Now I'll just take a look at if this log is here. So as you can see, there's a log which says starting server. So you can log outside your route handler as well, which is good. Let's go back to documentation, and here you'll find some more information how you can configure those into Fossify object when you are initializing your server. For example, logger for serializing, and then if you go down, we got logger, and pretty print is true, which is like, it is going to make it a little bit nicer. This is throwing an error. It says it cannot find this Pinot Pretty module. So I'll just stop the server, go to terminal, and I'm going to paste this command, and I'm going to install that as a dev dependency. So type npm install save -dev, And now if you start the server, you're not gonna get an error because we have a Pinot prettier. In terms of logs, they're looking much better. You can see the message in yellow, starting server. You've got some more information about what type of log is it. It is info. So if I go and change this to 1, save that, and now you see it is coming as yellow as well because it's a warning. It's gonna make your life easier by reading logs. And then, you know, it's pretty cool. You can find more configuration about Pretty Pinot here as well, and you can go into details by customizing this the way you like, but that's out of the scope of this video. So we'll go back to logging, and here is basically some configuration, fairly easy to follow. Just go ahead and take a look at it and you will get to know. One last thing I want to show you here is the way to write that to file. So you can also use a log to be written on the file. I'm going to just grab this and we'll just paste that here, and I'm going to create a file, log.txt. Okay, and let's go and create that file there as well. Let's just say log.txt. Okay, and now you will notice every time you have a new request, let's go to Postman, and I'm gonna make a request. Okay, it says reply, send, reply, send, reply, send. Now when we look at this log.ts file, let me zoom out a bit, and you can see it is now writing to the file. How cool is this? By just adding this flag here, it is going to start writing to the file depending on the path that you're getting. Okay, cool. That's pretty cool. So let's go back to documentation, and you can also do some reading on streams. This is basically out of scope of this video. It's going to take too much longer to explain that. That wraps up our logging section for this course. But one last thing to make sure you understand, the Fossify logger uses Pinot as its logger. Pinot is a very famous library. I just clicked on it, and here you can see it's got like, you know, 8.9k stars. There's a lot of contributors to, you know, who are working on this library, and it's used by almost 97k people. So it's pretty solid, no stress around this. So yeah, Pinot is being used. If you want to customize your logging behavior into details, you gotta take a look at Pinot. Now I should have put this section at the bottom because this is something that we will be using in our actual project. Next, we're gonna take a look at this content type parser. In Fossify documentation, there is a very good guide about content parser. But what is content parser? Content type parsing means the type of data that is sent by a client. We should be able to parse that. Natively, Fossify only support application/JSON and text/plain. Give you a demo for that. So we'll go back to WebStorm and we'll take a look at our post request, which is checking the type of the body, logging the body, and then also replying with 201 code, sending request.body back as well. So if we go to Postman, I'm going to make sure this is JSON. Okay, let's send that, and you get to see it is parsing things properly and returning what we are sending. So if I change this to always and send, you get to see what's being returned. Okay, now it is a type of JSON. How about changing this type that we payload that we're sending to text? Let's send that. It returns the JSON object because it is going to parse this. So if you go to headers, you take a look at here, we have specified the content type as to be this JSON, right? Fossify natively support applications/JSON and text/plain. But looking at the documentation, that's what it's saying. And if the content type is not one of these, this error will be thrown. So let's try creating that error. I'm going to change this to, let's say, a body to be, let's say, hello world. Let's send, and you get to see an error. It says unexpected bad JSON 0, so it's not really considering this as JSON. So let's keep that as a JSON, but I'm going to change this to, let's say, XML, and then send that. It's still returning what it's supposed to return because it's just parsing a JSON. If we change this to, let's say, header, and then we're going to change application to XML, and then send, and there you go. So here we have this message saying 415 is an invalid media type, unsupported media type, and then the message says unsupported media type, and this is what we're passing. Well, if you do that, then you should be able to parse XML, right? But the thing is, you need to specify your parser. And here's a guide how you can add your custom parser. So if I go ahead and then grab this code from here, which basically telling me to use an API on Fastify instance called add content type parser. Then you specify the types that you want to support. Then there is a callback function, and then in the callback function you have access to the payload, right? And then the request, and then you call the done function once you're done parsing. So here there's library XML parser being used, and that takes a payload, and then the callback function. Once this payload is being parsed to XML, it is going to run the callback function, which actually run this done. So this is how you add custom parsers to your Fastify. There's no point to show you demo here, but if you follow this guide, you should be able to just add this to your Fastify instance. So if I go to app.json, let me go above just after this, and then put that function here, and Fastify is supposed to be app, and then that's what we're doing here. So XML parser does not exist. So what I will do here is go to the Chrome and search for XML parser. So XML parser npm, and maybe this one is better. So there's a bunch of XML parsers that you can use. I'm actually going to skip this step, but you got the idea, right? So let's go to next features. Now this API, the content type API, provides many functions. So it has a function to add your custom parser, to check whether there is a custom parser exists, to remove a custom parser, or remove all content type parser, and a body parser and catch-all. So here you will go down and you'll see this function can check to see if the parser exists, and that's the sample code that you will do. If you want to remove the content parser, here's a sample code for you. Just copy paste, call it on your Fastify instance, and these content type parsers will be removed. In case you want to remove all the content type parser, there's an API remove all content type parsers from here as well. If you go down, it talks about body parser, where you can just specify right here, parse as string or parse as whatever you want to do. So take a look at this guide. Pretty straightforward. Don't have to copy paste the code for you guys to go through this. Okay, so that's where we covered our content type parser. Topic we're going to talk about is decorators, and it's one of my favorite topic. So let's go to WebStorm and let's take a look at the situation here. Let's say if you want to add something to your instance of Fastify, how do you do that? We'll take a look at the documentation and follow from there. So I'm going to read this passage. It says the decorator APIs allows customization of a core Fastify object, such as server instance itself, that's what I said, and any request and reply object during the HTTP request lifecycle. And this decorator API is used to attach any type of property to the core object, like functions, plain objects, or native types. Decorator API is asynchronous. So if you attempt to use this API asynchronously, then you gotta make sure that you use the register API along with the Fossify plugin, which basically makes sure that before your Fossify instance is booting, all your decorators are completed or initialized. Now, decorating core object with API allows underlying JavaScript engine to optimize server request and reply objects. Here they have an example, which is a bad example. He's using add hook, which we have not talked about. Here are hooks that we will. So what I'm going to do is skip this example. And we're going to go straight to usage guide. Here's a way that you can use decorator. So this method is used to customize the Fossify server instance. Here's a sample code. So if I go ahead and then first of all copy this code, we'll go to this line and paste that here. And I'm going to change that Fossify to app. And let's just say just the conf, okay? Now within this decorator, we specified two objects, db sum.db and then the port. The way we can access that, it's specified here. You can use this instance of your Fossify and then call in the object conf. For example, let's grab this post request. Actually, let's get rid of that. And we're gonna clean up some code from here. Let me just remove this then block. It's much cleaner now. Now I'm going to use app.conf.db and we are going to just log this. So console.log, save that. Now here it is actually saying unresolved variable. Well, because the app conf does not really tell a compiler that it is unresolved, so I'm just gonna let it complain and then send this get request. So if I send the get request, you see it is logging some db, and I'm gonna change this to my custom database. Save it and then send that again, and it says my custom database. So this way we actually modify the Fossify instance by adding this conf object into that. Let's take a look at some more information from documentation. So also it says here that you can use this, which is bound to Fossify server in the route handler. So if I go back and then call this as this.conf and save that, let's run an API call. It is going to throw a server error. The reason why that is because in the error syntax it's going to break. So what you're going to do is you're going to use this function and remove this. Now when I save the file and go to Postman and let's send, and you can see it is now not throwing error, it says object return. So the arrow syntax function is going to cause an issue when you're using this. In the documentation, it also talks about dependencies. So above, when we had to look at this usage, here's a dependency. So what are the dependencies? Well, dependencies in simple words are other decorators that your current decorator will rely on. For example, if decorator A needs a decorator B, C, X, Y, then you can just put them here and they will be available into your callback function. So here we got this Fossify decorator reply, which is another API that allows you to change the method properties to the core reply object. So this core reply object that we looked at, this decorator reply will add methods or property to that. Now, if we go down, there are more information about decorators like decorator requests. This will add or remove properties from your request object. So its APIs are cool, and you can add pretty much all kind of logics within the decorator as well, which you want to be reused in many different places. And also there are some APIs available for this decorator API. For example, you have this has decorator. This is going to check whether this decorator exists. So if I just copy this code and go to WebStorm, and we do know that we have this conf decorator. So what I'll do is I'll just use this, paste that here, and we are going to actually use app.hasDecorator, and then we use conf. Okay, this should return true. Let's go and create a request. And once you do a request, this is where it's logging now. So this is coming as true, yes. But if I say conf and send that, it's going to return false, because you can see there's no decorator named conf exists in our code. So similarly, we have some other APIs like has request decorator, has reply decorators, that you can check whether this decorator exists on your reply object or request object. Then we also talk about decoration and encapsulation. I'm going to read this line here. So it says defining a decorator using decorate request or decorate reply with the same name more than once in the same encapsulated context will throw an exception. So this is the point that to remember when you're going to specify the same decorator. For example, here it has a same decorator named view, right? It is existing here as well. So server decorator reply, and when you try to start a server, it is not going to start a server because it's going to see, hey, there are two decorators available with the same name view and they are in the same context. Then it's going to throw an error. If you look at down example, they talk about, it says server.decorator reply. So this is on decorator reply. This is a view decorator. Then it is going to register asynchronously your another decorator with the view, but this is actually inside this another callback. It's not in the same context. That is why it's not going to throw an error. So make sure you understand the context. Now here it talks about getters and setters. So decorator accepts special getters, setters objects, and these objects have functions named getter and setters. Through the setter function is optional. This allows defining properties via decorators. Now here, if you within the decorator, you are going to use some mutability or immutability concepts, then you can actually specify things within the getter functions that you want to just expose on foo, and sometimes you don't want to set things, then you can expose through setter, which is not going to be just going to be an optional, and you don't really have to define that. So here it says console.log. It's a getter which is being returned. So yeah, in the project we will take a look at the actual examples. So in a nutshell, decorators are a way to add, remove properties from your Fossify instance or your reply object or your request object. Okay, so next topic we're going to take a look at is hooks. Hooks are registered with Fossify.addHook method and allow you to listen to the specific events in an application or request response lifecycle. You gotta make sure that you register hook before the event is triggered, otherwise event will be lost. By using hooks, you can interact directly with the lifecycle of Fossify. Now let's go to the code, and we're gonna take a look at how do we add hook. But first of all, let's clear out a few things from our code. Set a hook which will be executed on a request. So just below register, I'm gonna start typing app.addHook, and GitHub Copilot is giving me this suggestion, which I'm gonna take, and I'm gonna change this to pre-handler from on request. Copy on request, paste that here, and I'm gonna save the file. And let's go to Postman and try sending this request. Once I do that, as you can see, it is running on request and logging false, which basically coming from here, by the way. It's not really a false thing. So send, you get this on request and you get false. Save. And you can see now every time there's a request, this is going to basically run this code. So you can do a lot of customized code here, which is very, very helpful. Now, if we go to documentation and we go to hooks, here's a list of hooks that you can add to your Fastify instance. So we just use this on request, but you can also have this pre-validation, pre-handler, pre-serialization. If there's an error, you want to cache that error, you can use the hook, which is amazing. You got some on send, on response, on timeout, and there are a lot of things here that you can do within these hooks. So the concept around here is, if you want to run any arbitrary code before requests get to your actual logic, then you can do that with hooks. And hooks are reusable, which is great. Every time there is a request, this hook will trigger. Now it talks about done function. Well, done is a function to continue with the life cycle. We haven't looked at the life cycle yet, but here's a brief introduction of a life cycle. Let me read through this. So following the schema of internal life cycle of Fastify, on the right branch, every section there is a next phase of a life cycle. On the left branch, there is a corresponding error code that will be generated if the parent throws an error. Note, all the errors are automatically handled by Fastify. So here you look at incoming requests. It is going to call this routing, and it's going to ask for instance logger. It's going to run on request hook if exists. It's going to look for pre-parsing hook, parsing hook, pre-validation, validation, and then it's going to continue doing that. Now, if we call this done function, for example, this done function is called, then what it will do, it will basically continue with the life cycle hook. And it's easy to understand where each hook is executed by just looking at this page. As you can see now, these are the hooks that get executed. Now we'll go back and we'll take a look at adding a done function and what is the difference here. So if I go ahead and then change this parameter list to done, I'm going to call done as well and save it. Here we have an error. Well, the error is like, async function has too many arguments. Well, that's true because we're not going to need async here. Once you remove that, your server is back up and running. You send the request to Postman, and then your hook are running as well. Now let's add another hook. I'm going to use app, add a hook, and then say pre-handler. And we just let it run. And I'm going to go to Postman and send again. Now it says on request was executed and then pre-handler was executed, right? So if I remove this done, right, what is the sequence here? Let's send it, and now it says on request, okay? And within this on request, we're not really continuing with our lifecycle hook, because now there is another hook that has to be executed. We will not be able to get to that. So that's a problem when you have multiple hooks and not calling done, because it does not know when to finish from this hook. So if I go ahead and then say done, and then let's send it again, this time it's going to run this on request. When the function is executed, it's going to call this done, which means get out of this hook, and then it's going to look for a second hook that will be pre-handler, and that's going to be executed. If you look at the documentation here, same thing happens here. It's going to run on hook, then pre-parsing, parsing, pre-validation, and here we have a pre-handler that we just took a look. Now let's go back. And we basically don't need to talk about this lifecycle in details right now. There's some more information that you can go through, but all of these things will be clear when we start an actual project. Now on request hook, we can also use async await. So if you want to use async await, you need to make sure you call await on your method that you're calling inside your callback. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Now, all of these is going to be a bit of information about every hook, so I don't want to waste time to going through every hook and just copy pasting code and showing you. So go through these hooks and then you will know what exactly they are about and what you can do, and you have the reference to the life cycle as well. Now, another few hooks, in case you miss it, I'll just point out there's a very cool hook. It triggers when a new plugin is registered and a new encapsulation context is created. And this is a pretty great hook. You maybe want to find out if a plugin is being registered, when it's being registered. This is a really best way to figure that out. You know, scope. Scope is another topic. Every handler function has its own scope. Fastify instant has its own scope. So onClose will basically, let me read this actually. Except for onClose, all hooks are encapsulated. This means that you can decide where your hook should run by register, as explained in the plugin guide, which we will revisit later. But yeah, that was self-explanatory, and all of these are very, very self-explanatory, guys. Take a look at this and you will be able to understand. So let's get going with a next topic, which is middlewares. I'm going to take you to documentation, and in the reference guide you will see a middleware. Well, middleware is not really important topic, but I just wanted to put it in the core concept because middleware allows you to run arbitrary code in the middle. So middleware, right? Well, the thing is, it's like an Express middlewares if you're coming from Express background, but middlewares are no longer supported out of the box from Fastify 3.0.0. But you're gonna have to install the external plugin such as Fastify Express or MIDI. An example for registering Fastify Express to use Express middleware is by fastify.register required Fastify Express, and from this point onwards you will be able to use middlewares from Express like Chorus, DNS, Prefetch Control, or all of these middlewares can be used. Now you can also use MIDI, which provides support for simple Express style middleware but improved performance, and that's an example for that. So both packages can be downloaded, installed, search for them on npm, and that's about it. So there are three other scenarios that I would like to share here. Fastify offers some alternative to the most commonly used middleware. So like Fastify, you has this plugin Fastify Helmet, Fastify Chorus, Fastify Static for Static. So basically these are very popular in Express world, but Fastify has its own implementation in the form of plugins, so I would recommend to use those plugins instead of just directly trying to use Express-based plugin or any other plugin and then registering that as a plugin. So that wraps up our main topics, but before we start our main project, which will get us, understanding how to use all this concept that we learned, I'm going to quickly go through some of the documentation which we haven't talked about. For example, errors. Errors handling Node.js is explained here, but Fastify has its own way of error handling, which you can read from here. It's basically very close to the plain JavaScript error handling, but you got some APIs that you can use like set error handler. Also, you have a list of Fastify error codes. So all of these error codes will be thrown by Fastify, and what they mean, you can go through their description here. Next, we have in documentation a reference for lifecycle. And lifecycle, we already looked at it briefly. It explains how the reply side lifecycle will work, how the response lifecycle will work. It's basically here. Okay, it's in the graph. So I've already explained that, but we will go through this in details when we start our project and try to use some, understanding of lifecycle and implement those logics. Then we also have some other information related to Fastify, such as long-term supported version. So it says Fastify long-term supported version is provided according to the schedule laid out in this document. Yep, if you want to learn more about the versioning of Fastify, you can take a look at this document. We also have some information about HTTP 2. So it says Falsify offers experimental support for HTTP 2 starting from Node.js 8 LTS, which includes HTTP without the flag. So about information regarding HTTP is here. Next up, we pretty much cover everything. And last most important API that you need to know is this server factory. So Falsify module exports a factory function that is used to create a Falsify server. And given that our code, this app holds that Falsify instance or Falsify server instance. This factory function accepts an option object which is used to customize the resulting instance. For example, we added this logger level debug pretty print and in the file. Okay, that's one option that we're pushing into this Falsify server instance. But also you can see how much customization that it takes. So if you look at all the options, and you can actually call some methods on them as well. So here's a list of everything available on Falsify server instance. I'm gonna try finding logger. Okay, so that's logger. Yep, there you go. So here it talks about initial config that you can basically put into your Falsify server while initializing, and one of them is this logger and then the level that you pass in. Okay, so here are the flags that you can use within your Falsify options when initializing it. So this is a quite long document, basically listing out every single thing and then allowing you to configure those or put values into it according to your configuration. So yeah, that's very important. You gotta master this page, actually go through this many times so you understand what's available in Falsify. So at this stage, we learned pretty much all the concepts that we said we're going to be learning, core concepts, and then we got covered with advanced concept where I said it's going to be a touch base. Now from this one onwards, we're going to have an actual project, which I'm going to break into 2 videos because this video is almost 1 hour, more than 1 hour long already. So the time stamps are available in this video. You can switch between any topic using the timestamp, but the part 2 will basically have this actual project. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, give this video a thumbs up if you like it. The part 2 will be released really soon, in about a few days after the launch of this video. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys in the part 2 of Falsify project, which is going to be a work time API.